The U.S. claims that Iran's oil industry is already showing signs of distress thanks to an American naval blockade. And this comes as Trump administration is set to be discussing in Iran an offer to end the war and open the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claimed that Iran's oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to U.S. blockade. He claimed that pumping will soon collapse and gasoline shortages in Iran are next. He later posted a story by the Wall Street Journal that claims that blockade is pushing Iran towards extreme measures to keep pumping oil. The report suggests that Iran is storing oil on floating tankers as the tanks are filling up due to the blockade. Citing officials from Iran, the report claimed that Iran has resorted to using containers and disused tanks. The Bessent also warned global companies and foreign governments of tough sanctions if they continue doing business with Iranian airlines. Now, all of this comes as White House say that U.S. President Donald Trump has discussed a new Iranian proposal on ending the war with his top national security aides. Iran has proposed a mutual reopening of the strait, leaving the nuclear discussion for later in the process. Meanwhile, dozens of countries made a joint call for Iran to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz at a UN session initiated by Bahrain. The United Nations chief led a chorus of diplomats urging a fuller opening of the vital waterway.
I appeal to the parties, open the strait, let ships pass, no tolls, no discrimination, let trade resume, let the global economy breathe.
Indiscriminate planting of mines in international waterways. That makes Iran the international criminal, pirates of the straits. Tehran admits to these crimes, but is so incompetent, it also admits to not knowing where the mines are.
In response, Iran's UN envoy asserted Iranian sovereignty over the strait. The Iranian envoy to UN also accused the countries of double standards while pointing out that there is a U.S. naval blockade in place as well.
It is regrettable that some members, while asserting the navigational rights must not be threatened, deliberately ignore the United States imposition of a so-called maritime blockade that threatens international navigation. They have once again exposed the double standards. The concerns for maritime safety and freedom of navigation is neither genuine nor consistent with their action and positions.
France's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, while denouncing Iran's actions, said that the U.S. started the war without clearly setting a goal and in a manner that flouts international law. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that the U.S. is being humiliated by Iran as he criticized Washington's attempts to get out of a war it entered without laying out clear objectives. Merz suggested that the Trump administration is being outwitted at the negotiating table by Tehran. All right, to discuss more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Avner Cohen, live from Ontario, California. He is a professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at Middlebury Institute and also a West Asia analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, Dr. Cohen. Of course, we have been talking about this issue for so long now, but let's start with Iran, who has now proposed a mutual reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that Trump had also talked about, calling it a beautiful collaboration, leaving, of course, now that leaves the nuclear discussion for later in the process. First of all, what do you make of this proposal, considering that both the U.S. and Israel cited their casus belli for this conflict for the referencing to the nuclear topic?
Well, it makes the priority of both sides. I think both sides wants to open the straits, even though the Iranian proposal does not actually specify whether it will be opened without recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the straits. Until now, this was not the case. What about the payment of those fees? Until now, this was not the case. So those were not part of the proposal. It's unclear. And of course, unpacking with the nuclear issue, which is much more difficult. Clearly, both the United States and Iran do not want to go back to another hostilities, to another exchange of fire. The question is whether unpacking would satisfy the United States. And I think the obvious criticism, as the Chancellor of Germany already says, the United States seems to be reaching a situation that would be not much better than it was before the hostilities, and perhaps even worse than the one in 2015 when the JCPOA was signed. So the Trump administration, with that kind of thing, they would save the hostilities and they would allow some time to negotiate. But the achievement is not there. And I think that's a problem for the Trump administration.
Well, with that being said, in his latest tweet, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that while the surviving RGC leaders are trapped like drowning rats in a sewage pipe, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to the U.S. blockade. And we have seen some reports saying, and the U.S. Central Command, talking about this guided missile destroyer USS Rafael Peralta, enforcing a blockade of Iranian ports and intercepting these tankers. And there are several tankers that have been intercepted by this U.S. Armada, if we call it so. Looking at that situation, do you think Iran actually has any leverage at this point?
It's unclear. I think either side has a very different concept of the other side. I think the United States believe that Iran, who might be losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day by being blocked and by looking for a way to store temporarily their oil on ships, and the Iranians who think that the world economy, the global economy, the price of oil in the United States itself, in my own state, it's almost $7 for the good oil, which is unbelievable. So each has a different perceptions of the damage on the other side, and they believe that if they can wait a little longer, the other side would cave. Each of them has a different perception of the time factor on the other side. I don't think that it could continue for that long, because indeed the Iranian economy suffer a great deal, but also the American economy and the global economy. So we'll see. But the deal as of now, which is proposed by the Iranians, is not a good deal for the United States, as long as there is no any, at least preliminary clarity about the nuclear issue. Leaving the nuclear issue alone, that would be either leaving it for a long time until there will be any resolution, if at all, or the resolution would be not much better than it was even in 2015.
Well, as you mentioned, that time will tell, but time, of course, has become a very important factor at this point. We've seen Arakchi traveling to Pakistan for the third time in 48 hours. It does seem that Iran does want to get a deal done, but they don't want to give out the Strait of Hormuz because, of course, that has become one of the biggest leverage for Iran at this point. Do you think this is just watching who is going to blink first? And if you look at it, who has the ball in the court at this moment? Who can sustain and sustain this period of time? Is it Iran or the U.S.?
I think it would be effort to bridge that and to get some kind of clarity on the nuclear issue. I think the nuclear issue cannot be left alone, and I think that the President Trump, is not going to leave this issue completely put aside to some future date. So I think that's the issue. I think the issue is to get a certain kind of understanding, maybe not a full deal from Iran on the nuclear issue, and then perhaps to go by stages. First, the issue of the Straits of Hormuz, vis-a-vis also the American blockade, and then with some understanding of time to resolve the other issue. So I think the United States is pressure on this. I do not believe that the president would accept the Iranian offer as is.
And Trump has always said that they have all the cards. But after that, about on Monday, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Ghalibaf, what he had said was that in a cryptic message, he said that although U.S. President Donald Trump claims he has all the cards, Iran too holds quite the leverage. Who appears to be holding the card, and what kind of leverage is Iran in FM talking about here?
I think both sides do not want to resume hostilities. I think the Iranian cards, meaning hitting the neighboring states, the Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, I mean, all those countries, and I think that they are vulnerable. And this war has discovered how much they are vulnerable, as much as Iran itself is vulnerable. So I think both sides do not have appetite to go into hostilities again. The question is whether there will be enough way to bridge this. And I think that the president believes that he can put enough pressure on Iran that they will change their offer and will offer another things. The other thing that we have not mentioned is the fact that Iran has difficulties to reach within itself, within the various factions which are fighting over having the final word in Iran, given the fact that the supreme leader is hiding. Communication with him is not that easy. He's still hiding. And there is still competition over power within Iran, within different factions.
On the other hand, as you had mentioned earlier, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that the U.S. is being humiliated by Iran and has also suggested that the Trump administration is being outwitted at the negotiating table by Iran. At this point in time, when we look at these opinions coming from Europe, which have been called out by Trump, how do you see Trump reacting to this? And of course, it's Europe that has been suffering from the Strait of Hormuz blockade. What kind of effort do you think will be taken by the Europeans at this point?
I was surprised, actually, that the Chancellor Merz, was saying it in public. This is a view that is being heard in Europe. It has been informally was leaked to the media, and many people believe in that. To say it publicly is a different thing, and I was surprised. I think it would reinforce Trump, and I think the American position is to a degree drifting. Because the United States clearly, and the president himself, is not ready to resume hostilities. So that option is not at the hands, is not available, and you need to put a pressure. And the Iranian trying to make us if this blockade is not a pressure strong enough. So I think we will wait for a few more days on each side, and I think the United States would press Iran further, and we'll see how the Iranians respond.
All right, we'll wait for that to happen. Thank you so much for joining on the broadcast, Dr. Cohen, and giving your insights into this. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.